Christmas in Denver should have felt warm, cozy, a time when family wrapped itself around you like a blanket. Instead, that December morning felt like the universe had folded a cruel joke into a glossy package with a bow. The air smelled of cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee, but my stomach knotted when my parents ushered us toward the living room, faces glowing with anticipation. Sloane, my younger sister, bounced on her heels like a child waiting for candy. She was 28, but she still carried herself like the darling of the house. A shriek split the air as my father jingled keys wrapped in red ribbon. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," he said, and everyone turned toward the driveway. There it was, a brand new Jaguar, gleaming under the winter sun, crowned with a massive red bow. The kind of car you see in commercials where husbands surprise their wives in snow-dusted suburbs. Except here, it was my parents gifting their grown daughter a luxury vehicle as if she'd just saved the world. Sloane covered her face with her hands, tears streaming, before rushing outside to touch the hood, her manicured fingers trembling with delight. Cameras flashed. My mother's voice wavered in awe. "You deserve it, honey. You've worked so hard." I sat cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by torn wrapping paper. A small box rested in my lap, wrapped in leftover cartoon paper better suited for a toddler's birthday. Inside, I found a cartoon wallet, clearly meant for children, with a tiny sticker still stuck to the corner. Tucked into the fold was a $3 novelty gift card, the kind you'd buy as a gag gift in a gas station. I blinked, waiting for someone to laugh, to admit it was a mistake, but my parents looked at me with that same thin smile they'd worn for decades, smiles that said, "You'll understand. You always do." I'm Harper Lane, 32 years old, a structural engineer recently promoted to lead site supervisor on projects that will outlast us all. I've worked nights, weekends, every extra shift that came my way, to build a career that's solid and unshakable. And yet, in that moment, staring down at a $3 card, while my sister sobbed with joy over a six-figure car, I felt smaller than I had in my entire life. The room erupted in chatter. My father puffed his chest with pride. "Reliable transportation is essential for her design clients," he declared, as though Sloane were leading the next Silicon Valley boom instead of freelancing logos from her apartment. My mother clasped her hands together, beaming as if the Jaguar itself were proof of divine favor. Sloane hugged me, pressing her perfume into my shoulder. "Don't worry, sis," she whispered, voice sticky sweet. "I'll drive you around whenever you need. Your old Civic must be barely holding on." Her words echoed, and something inside me cracked. My Civic, 7 years, over 180,000 miles, had carried me through snowstorms, construction sites, and more late-night drives than I could count. I paid every installment with my own hands, my own sweat. That car was loyalty on wheels. But in their eyes, it was scrap metal next to Sloane's Jaguar. I should have let it go. Another Christmas, another insult. But when my father handed me a folder, just some insurance papers for record keeping, my blood ran cold. There it was, in black ink. My name listed as co-payer for the Jaguar. No discussion, no consent. Somehow, my parents had decided that not only was I worth less in gifts, but I was expected to shoulder responsibility for Sloane's luxury. I smiled, tightly, sliding the papers back across the table. My parents carried on with laughter and champagne, but inside, something shifted. For 32 years, I had been the responsible daughter, the quiet one, the fixer. That morning, with a $3 card in my hand and a Jaguar in the driveway, I realized I was also their safety net, their plan B, their scapegoat. And for the first time in my life, I knew I couldn't play that role anymore. If you're hearing this, leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. Hit subscribe and stay tuned to see how I finally walked away after 32 years of being treated as the forgotten daughter. I truly want to know how far my story will reach and who out there understands what it feels like to be measured at $3 while your sibling drives away in a Jaguar. The bathroom door clicked softly behind me, muting the laughter and clinking glasses from the living room. I leaned against the cold marble sink, gripping the edge as though I might fall without it. My reflection in the mirror stared back, too composed, too calm, like someone playing a role they never auditioned for. 32 years of favoritism, of excuses, of being told I was the strong one, so I didn't need support. All of it crashed down in that tiny tiled room. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. What rose instead was pressure, like concrete setting in my chest, hard and immovable. I could still hear my father bragging about Sloane's new Jaguar, my mother's voice fluttering with devotion, and Sloane's syrupy promise that she would drive me around when my Civic gave out. I had spent months saving to buy my parents thoughtful gifts, a leather case my father admired, a silver bracelet my mother had longed for, a new lens for Sloane's design work, and in return, I was handed a novelty card worth $3 and insurance paperwork, with my name buried in the fine print. I pressed my palms flat on the counter, forcing air into my lungs. This wasn't a fluke. It was the pattern of my life. I had rehearsed my promotion announcement the whole drive from Denver to that house. Lead site supervisor. A career milestone I thought would finally earn their pride. But the words withered on my tongue when I saw that red bow in the driveway. By midnight, the house had gone quiet. Sloane's laughter drifted up the staircase and then faded into silence. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, staring at the faded posters still taped to the wall, surrounded by memories of a girl who kept hoping her parents would see her. At 1:29 a.m., I finally stood. My suitcase was half packed already, just the essentials: a stuffed bear from my grandmother, a photo album, my first blueprint stored in a wooden box. The rest stayed behind. The gifts I had given them over the years felt like artifacts in a museum that no one visited. I padded down the stairs, careful not to wake anyone, though part of me almost wanted them to see me leaving. The Civic keys felt warm in my pocket, familiar, loyal. On the kitchen counter, I placed my house key beside the coffee maker, the same machine that would brew their morning comfort in a few hours. My chest tightened, but my hands didn't tremble. They had made their choice. Now I was making mine. Snowflakes swirled in the air as I loaded my suitcase into the Civic. Streetlights glowed in hazy circles. I started the engine, its hum steady against the quiet of the night, and pulled away from the curb. Denver faded behind me with each mile. Somewhere outside Colorado Springs, I stopped for gas. While scrolling through old emails, one caught my eye, a digital loan confirmation. My stomach turned cold. My name was there, typed neatly beneath Sloane's, marked as co-signer for a loan she had taken out 3 years earlier. I had never agreed to it, never even known. My father had signed on my behalf. The betrayal stung sharper than the winter wind. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel as the storm thickened. Then I powered my phone down. No more calls, no more manipulation. Southbound signs pointed toward Arizona, and I followed them into the dark, my Civic slicing through snow and silence. For the first time, I wasn't running. I was leaving. The storm chased me down the highway. snow pelting against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists. By dawn, my eyes burned from the strain of keeping the Civic between lines blurred by ice. I pulled into a rest stop outside Albuquerque, my body heavy with exhaustion. The car heater rattled as I scrolled through my contacts. My thumb hovered before landing on a name I hadn't said aloud in months. Mara, my college roommate. The phone rang twice before her warm voice filled the car. Harper? It's 5 a.m, are you? Wait, are you crying? I'm not crying, I lied, though my throat was raw. I need a place to land. There was no pause, no hesitation. Phoenix, come here. Stay as long as you need. I'll make up the guest room. You're not doing this alone. For a moment, I sat frozen, staring at the snowy horizon. Family had never offered me unconditional safety. Mara had, without even asking why. My chest loosened as I whispered, "Thank you." By the time I crossed into Arizona, the snow gave way to barren desert, sunlight pouring over the mountains. Phoenix stretched ahead like a promise. At Mara's apartment, she hugged me so tightly, I thought my ribs might crack. She didn't ask for details that first night. She just handed me a blanket, pointed to the spare room, and said, "Sleep. Everything else can wait." The following morning, I opened my laptop with shaking hands. I drafted a transfer request to the Desert Bridge project I'd heard whispers about during staff meetings. A complex structure meant to connect communities across a wide expanse of desert. It felt symbolic, a bridge not only in steel and concrete, but in my own life. I hit send and held my breath. Later that week, Mara insisted I join her Thursday night therapy group. "It's not just for addicts," she explained. "It's for anyone untangling family knots." I resisted at first. Therapy felt like admitting weakness, and weakness had never been allowed in my vocabulary. But that night, I sat in a circle of strangers in a church basement that smelled faintly of coffee and dust. When it was my turn, words tumbled out before I could stop them. Favoritism, invisibility, the $3 gift card, the Jaguar. A man in his 60s nodded slowly. Love without respect isn't love. It's ownership. The sentence burrowed under my skin, sharp and undeniable. For the first time, I understood my exhaustion wasn't weakness. It was the weight of carrying everyone else's expectations. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an email. My heart pounded as I opened it. The subject line read, "Transfer approval. Effective immediately." I reread it twice, stunned. I had braced myself for rejection, for bureaucracy, for another fight. But then came the call from HR. "Harper," the manager said cheerfully, "that Phoenix role was reserved for you weeks ago. Your performance reviews practically wrote the recommendation themselves. Weeks ago." My escape hatch had been waiting, even as I sat under my parents' roof, wrapping gifts they wouldn't appreciate. A laugh escaped my lips, half bitter, half relieved. I could have left sooner, but maybe I needed the humiliation of Christmas morning to finally push me through the door. That night, as I prepared lesson notes for my first therapy group homework, my phone lit up with dozens of messages, voicemails, missed calls, texts, all from my parents and Sloan. Each one carried the same refrain. Mom's blood pressure is high. Mom's stress is my fault. Mom could end up in the hospital because I walked away. My hands trembled, but I didn't answer. Guilt clawed at me. But for the first time, I also felt a new sensation. Defiance. Their manipulation sounded thinner, weaker, against the foundation I was beginning to build for myself. Phoenix sunlight has a way of bleaching everything, even memories. My new studio apartment wasn't much. 600 square feet, with a kitchenette barely big enough for a coffee maker. But it was mine. No family photos judging me from the walls. No childhood posters reminding me of who I used to be. Just wide windows that caught the afternoon glow and hardwood floors that echoed with possibility. I spent evenings exploring small rituals that belonged to me alone. A thrifted lamp, a clay pot I shaped during Saturday pottery class, a futon that sagged a little but cradled me just right. My Thursdays were for therapy group, where voices of strangers knitted together into something resembling community. One woman spoke about her father's silent punishments, another about her brother draining her savings. I realized favoritism wasn't just my private curse. It was a pattern repeating in countless families. Each week, I found myself speaking louder, steadier, less ashamed. Work fell into place, too. The Desert Bridge project was ambitious, grueling, and breathtaking. Long days stretched into nights as I sketched load distributions and pored over soil tests. For once, my calculations were praised without being compared to anyone else's accomplishments. When my supervisor clapped me on the back after a design review, I caught myself smiling without reservation. Then the envelope arrived. It was buried in a stack of mail I'd ignored. Grocery flyers, utility statements, a pottery class coupon. The thick white envelope bore the logo of my parents' insurance company. Inside was a bill. Coverage for the Jaguar. My breath caught. My name was listed clearly as a responsible party. According to their files, I was helping cover the premiums for a car I had never touched. A car that symbolized 32 years of being second best. I flipped through the documents, heat rushing to my face. The handwriting on the application wasn't mine, but the personal information was: my social security number, my old address, even my outdated work phone. My mother must have dug through archived files, recycling my data without asking. Family loyalty repurposed as fraud. For a moment, rage consumed me. Then training kicked in, the same discipline that helped me calculate bridge tolerances under stress. I sat at my desk, scanned the documents, and filed a formal complaint. Within a week, the insurer confirmed the fraud, removed my name, and launched an internal review. Still, the violation lingered like smoke in my lungs. It wasn't just about money. It was about erasure, about being seen not as a daughter, but as a tool. My parents had measured my worth at $3, then leveraged me for a Jaguar. That night, I returned to therapy group, hands shaking as I spoke. When someone hides behind the word family, do you let them decide your worth, or do you claim it yourself? The room was quiet. Then Raymond, the retired accountant, nodded slowly. Family is the easiest mask people wear. You're the one who decides if you let them keep it on. I walked home in the desert evening, stars sharp against the sky, repeating those words until they felt like armor. 2 days later, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number, but the voice belonged to the insurance company's lawyer. After confirming the fraud case, she lowered her tone. Miss Lane, if your father contacts you, document everything. If possible, record the conversation. It will help us protect you legally. Her advice reverberated through me. Record my father, the man whose voice had always set the rules in my life. The thought unsettled me, but the lawyer's words carried the weight of protection, not punishment. I set the phone down, staring at the ceiling of my little studio. The walls no longer felt bare. They felt like boundaries. Santa Fe greeted me with desert winds that smelled of piñon smoke and rose petals. The wedding venue, an adobe chapel lit with strings of lanterns, was breathtaking. Yet my stomach twisted the moment I saw the seating chart. There it was in black ink. Harper Lane, between Mom and Dad. A neat little tableau of reconciliation. staged for relatives who had whispered for months about my meltdown. I walked into the reception with steady shoulders and a leather folder tucked under my arm. Cousins rushed to hug me. Aunts whispered about how radiant I looked, but I barely heard them. When I reached the table, my father's grin was stiff, my mother's eyes watery. "So glad you came," she murmured, patting my hand as though we were already mending what they had spent decades breaking. Dinner plates clinked, champagne fizzed, and then the conversation began exactly as I expected. "We just want to move forward," Dad said, voice heavy with authority. "Let's put the past behind us." I opened the folder. Calm, factual, unemotional. The first page, side-by-side photos of birthday parties. Sloane's elaborate princess bash with pony rides and 20 friends. Mine the following year. 2 classmates, a grocery store cake, paper hats from the discount aisle. The next page, tuition statements. My loans totaling over $60,000. Sloane's receipts marked paid in full, including her find yourself trip to Europe. I flipped again. Birthday cards. Hers filled with flowing words of adoration. Mine clipped with advice like, "Work hard, you'll manage." Each page landed softly on the table, but the silence it created roared. My father's jaw tightened. My mother pressed her lips together. "This is unnecessary," she whispered. "No," I said evenly. "This is the truth." But here's where my choice became controversial. My phone, discreetly propped in my purse, was recording the entire exchange. New Mexico is a one-party consent state, and that one party was me. I hadn't made the decision lightly. The distorted stories had already started spreading. Relatives calling me dramatic, ungrateful, even unstable. I wanted the truth documented, unaltered. Later that night, after the vows were exchanged and the music faded, I sent the recording only to a handful of close relatives, the ones who mattered, the ones who deserved to know what was real. The reactions were immediate. My cousin Tara replied, "Finally, proof. I always suspected." Aunt Judith wrote, "You were brave to do this." But another message stung. "Harper, you crossed a line. Family conversations shouldn't be broadcast, no matter the reason." I sat on the hotel bed, staring at the glowing screen. Half the family applauded me for pulling back the curtain. The other half scolded me for betraying privacy. Both were right, in their own ways. I hadn't expected applause, but I also hadn't prepared for the sting of disapproval. As I slipped beneath the stiff hotel sheets, my phone buzzed again. A single message from my mother. "You'll regret this." I read it once, twice, a third time. The words pulsed in the dark like a curse, equal parts threat and prophecy. My chest tightened, but I didn't reply. For the first time, I let her words hang unanswered. I turned off the lamp and stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of wedding guests still celebrating below. Tomorrow would bring fallout, maybe fury. But tonight, the silence between us was mine. By the time the wedding weekend reached its second day, I was tired of whispers in hallways and relatives tugging me aside with urgent faces. Everyone seemed to have a theory, a demand, or a plea. So, I did what engineers do when chaos threatens to overrun the structure. You make a ledger. On a yellow legal pad, I drew 2 columns. On the left, everything I had given. The tuition I covered for myself, the gifts I sacrificed paychecks for, the countless hours of babysitting, favors, and silent support. On the right, everything they had demanded, co-signing loans I never agreed to, paying bills they forgot, stepping aside so Sloane could shine. The imbalance was glaring, undeniable, a lifetime of subtraction on my side, indulgence on theirs. That evening, I sat across from my parents at a round table in the hotel lounge, the ledger tucked under my arm. The air smelled of stale wine and wilted roses from the rehearsal dinner. I laid the paper down gently, sliding it across to them. "I'm done carrying this alone," I said. My voice surprised me. Calm, steady, factual. 2 conditions, I explained. Family therapy, respect for my boundaries. Nothing more, nothing less. If they wanted reconciliation, these were the terms. My father scoffed, reaching for his bourbon. "Therapy is for weak people." My mother's eyes welled up. "Boundaries? We're family. There are no boundaries." Before I could respond, my Aunt Margaret slipped into the booth beside me. Her voice was low but urgent. "Harper, there's something you need to know. Your father lost his job back in April. They've been hiding it. And the house, it's weeks from foreclosure. Most of it's tied to Sloane's debts." The words landed like bricks, pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. The sudden generosity with the Jaguar. The manipulative calls about Mom's blood pressure. The desperation humming beneath every conversation. It wasn't just favoritism. It was survival, and they expected me to fund it. I inhaled, slow and deliberate. This was the moment they assumed I would bend, swoop in like I always had, rescue them from the consequences of their own choices. I could have. My salary was solid, my savings steady. But for the first time, I chose not to. I reached into my bag, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the table. A list of licensed financial counselors in Denver, circled in neat ink. "This is what I can offer," I said. The silence was deafening. My father's face reddened. "Heartless," he hissed. My mother shook her head, whispering, "How can you turn your back on your family?" I didn't flinch. "I'm not turning my back. I'm refusing to be your bank." The conversation ended with my father shoving the ledger aside, muttering curses. As I stood to leave, he spat out the final blow. "If you walk away now, I'll report your Civic as stolen." I stopped cold. The Civic, my car, my title, every receipt in my name. His threat rang hollow, yet the audacity of it sliced deep. I walked out without another word, the desert night swallowing my anger whole. The library smelled faintly of leather and dust, the kind of room meant to impress guests with the illusion of history. High-backed chairs ringed a polished table. A fire crackled in the hearth, though the warmth never reached me. My parents were already seated, postured as if they had summoned me to a boardroom negotiation. I carried the leather folder under my arm like a shield. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor as I crossed the room and sat down, spine straight. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Instead, I opened the folder and laid out the evidence piece by piece. The first page, 2 photographs. On the left, Sloane's 7th birthday. Princess tiara, pony rides, 20 children squealing in delight. On the right, my 8th. 2 classmates at the kitchen table. A sheet cake with smudged frosting. "Remember these?" I asked, my tone neutral. Next page, tuition records. My student loans totaling over $60,000, still listed in my name. Beside it, receipts showing Sloane's tuition, paid in full, along with a year abroad, to find herself. Another page. Birthday cards. Hers filled with declarations of love. Mine with reminders to save money and work harder. The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackle of wood in the fireplace. My father's jaw twitched. "We always did what we thought was best," he muttered. I turned the final page. Emails. Proof that my name had been used to co-sign a loan without my consent. "Best for whom?" I asked softly. It was my mother who finally cracked. Her voice trembled. "You were strong, Harper. That's why. We gave Sloane more because she needed more. You didn't. You always managed. For a moment, I just stared at her. The admission I had waited 3 decades to hear felt like a knife dressed as mercy. So you withheld affection because I was strong? My voice rose, despite my effort to keep calm. Strength doesn't mean I deserved less love. It doesn't mean I was invisible. Her eyes dropped, wet with genuine tears this time. Not the manipulative kind. My father leaned back, arms crossed, still defiant. I closed the folder and placed it on the table. 2 conditions: family therapy, respect for my boundaries. Those are the only terms if you want me in your lives. My father scoffed. Boundaries? Families don't need boundaries. I met his glare evenly. Then you don't need me. The words hung between us like a drawn sword. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling. "We'll do it," she whispered. "Whatever it takes." My father stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the fire. For the first time, he looked smaller, less certain. I stood, gathering the folder. "I'll give you 1 month to schedule the first session. If it doesn't happen, I'm gone for good." My voice was steady, final. As I turned toward the door, Sloane slipped into the hallway beside me. She tugged my sleeve, her face pale. "Harper," she whispered urgently, glancing back toward the library. "You don't know the whole story yet." Her words prickled against my skin, sharper than the cold air drifting through the hallway. I stopped, searching her eyes. What story? But she shook her head, retreating before I could press further. I walked away, the echo of her warning following me like a shadow. The phone call came late one evening, as I was glazing a clay bowl in my little Phoenix studio. Sloane's name lit up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said, "Answer." Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Harper, I have to tell you something." About the Jaguar I waited, hands still dusted with clay. "The dealership. They used your information. I didn't know until the insurance mess came up. They pulled your data from Mom's old file to push the financing through." I should have said something sooner. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I cleared your name. Everything's been fixed for the first time in years." I heard honesty instead of entitlement in her tone. A part of me ached with relief. Another part hurt that she hadn't spoken sooner. Still, the apology mattered. It wasn't absolution, but it was a start. Weeks later, I got word that Dad had joined Alcoholics Anonymous. The man who once drowned himself in bourbon and authority now sat in folding chairs in a church basement, admitting weakness. Mom joined a parent support group, learning words like boundaries and emotional neglect. For once, therapy wasn't just my crusade. It was theirs, too. Meanwhile, my life in Phoenix bloomed. The Desert Bridge project pushed me to limits I didn't know I had. When the ribbon-cutting ceremony came, my name was listed as lead supervisor. Cameras flashed, officials shook my hand, and I stood proud, not as someone's daughter, not as Sloane's shadow, but as Harper Lane. Evenings, I returned to my apartment, now warm with small touches, pottery lining the windowsill, a desk scattered with sketches, a bookshelf filled with novels. I finally had time to read. Friends from therapy and pottery classes came over for dinners that ended in laughter, not manipulation. Mara was my constant anchor, reminding me that chosen family can be stronger than blood. On my mantel sat a piggy bank, not the childish cartoon one my parents once handed me, but a simple ceramic jar I crafted myself. Inside were novelty $3 bills, one for each week of freedom since I'd left Denver. They weren't tokens of revenge, but reminders of worth, physical proof that every week I chose myself was priceless. And then came Christmas again. I stood in my kitchen, the smell of rosemary and sage filling the air as friends crowded around the table. My laughter joined theirs, rich and unforced. When the toast came, Mara lifted her glass to Harper, who builds bridges in steel and in life. My cheeks warmed, not from shame this time, but from joy. I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built a life where love wasn't conditional, where respect was the foundation, not the reward. If the people who raised you once measured your value in scraps, would you fight them? Or would you build a life so radiant they could never dim it again? I chose the second, and it changed everything, because family should never be about control. It should be about love, respect, and mutual care. The best revenge isn't in tearing others down, but in creating a life so full, so authentic, that their betrayal loses its power. As I looked around the table, at the friends who had become family, at the clay bowls shaped by my own hands, at the quiet strength of a life rebuilt, I knew the truth. The girl who once accepted $3 as her worth was gone. In her place stood a woman who would never again let anyone decide her value.